Hello there, I'm Lloyd Evans. Welcome to Ramacrow. It's time for another voicemail. Today's voicemail is from Marcus. Let's listen to what Marcus has to say.
Hello, Lloyd. My name is Marcus. I'm calling from a city which I believe you're familiar with. It is the city of Austin in the state of Texas, United States of America. And I'm still somewhat disappointed, Lloyd, that I did not know you were coming to visit my home city because I really did want to meet you personally and have you sign my Reluctant Apostate book. But that's another matter for another voicemail. Anyway, getting back to this voicemail, Lloyd. First off, I'm a fourth generation Jehovah's Witness, or I was anyway. On my mother's side of the family, my great grandmother became a witness back when they were known as Bible students. And I've had uncles and cousins who've been Bethelites and who've been circuit overseers. And I've even had one uncle who graduated Gilead and served as a missionary down in South America for 13 years. And my older brother is an elder and a regular pioneer. And my father is an elder, and he's been one since I was a child. So the organization really does run strong in my family. However, I want nothing to do with this, Lloyd, and this is not for me. And like you've repeatedly said in your videos, this is nothing but a cult, and it is a cult that micromanages your personal life and your sex life. And I've just decided that I want nothing to do with this anymore. And I've never been happier being out of this organization. However, I have tried to speak to my mother and my father. I have been one of the lucky ones because my mother and father are old school. As long as I'm not officially disfellowshipped or disassociated, they will not shun me. But I've explained to them that we can still have a nice family bond without having to discuss religion. However, their reason for continuing to stay and not want to hear what I have to tell them or give them anything for thought is because they continue to argue the point that Peter told Jesus when he said, "Where else will we go? You have sayings of everlasting life." And that's even the argument my mother used when governing body member Mark Sanderson said that we must obey the faithful and discreet slave no matter what, no matter if it doesn't make sense from a human standpoint. And even my father says that where else will we go, even though it might not make sense. So my question to you, Lloyd, is how would you argue that point? What would you say to someone who basically says it may not make sense, it may not be right, it may not sound correct from a human standpoint, but we have nowhere else to go, such as the attitude of the Apostle Peter, which I'm pretty sure Peter was not part of a cult that micromanaged his personal life and sex life. But my question is, how could I argue that point with my parents, Lloyd, just to give them something to think about, to get them out of that mentality and to realize that it's not about having nowhere else to go. It's about being able to have freedom of thought and freedom of reasoning. If you could give me some ideas on how you would argue that point, Lloyd, and help me to try to reason with my mother and my father whenever they bring up those words that Peter told Jesus, I really would appreciate that. Feel free to use this message on your voicemail, Lloyd, and I appreciate your channel. I watch it all the time, and every time I watch your channel, that lets me make it very clear to myself that I'm never going back to this cult ever. Continue the good work, Lloyd, and continue the rebuttals on this ridiculous JW broadcast. And thank you very much, Lloyd, for the wonderful work you do. I hope to get an answer from you soon, and have a great day, Lloyd.
Thank you very much, Marcus. That's very sweet of you to leave that message. I'm sorry that we weren't able to connect on my 2 trips to Austin, 2019 and 2021. I was in your city. And yeah, I'm sorry about that. I will, however, sign your copy of The Reluctant Apostates as soon as we get to meet in person. Hopefully that won't be too long, because I quite like Austin. I think it's a really nice city. Anyway, that aside, you've left a really interesting voicemail about your parents who are not shunning you. You have been trying to persuade them that they are in a cult, it sounds like, and their reason for dismissing your arguments or the information you're showing them is essentially John chapter 6, verses 67 through 69. Maybe if Tibor is gracious, we can read that together so we know exactly what we're talking about. So Jesus said to the 12, "You do not want to go also, do you?" Simon Peter answered him, "Lord, whom shall we go away to? You have sayings of everlasting life. We have believed and come to know that you are the Holy One of God." So if a Jehovah's Witness were to use this one on me, I would be saying, where does it mention Jehovah's Witnesses here? Where does it mention an organization supposedly selected by Jesus invisibly in 1919, led by 8 individuals who claim to speak on behalf of God? Where is that described here? I'm seeing a conversation between Jesus and the 12 and his disciples, and Peter is saying, you, that's Jesus, have sayings of everlasting life. Manifestly, there are many, many people who have an affinity or love for Jesus and consider him to be their leader, who consider themselves Christian, and they're not calling themselves Jehovah's Witnesses. So really what your parents are arguing is that they alone are Christians, and everyone else who calls himself a Christian but isn't a Jehovah's Witness isn't really a Christian. And that's a big, big claim to be making, and the burden of proof, quite frankly, is on them. They need to prove that Jesus invisibly chose the faithful and discreet slave in 1919, which of course they can't. It's just an unfalsifiable claim that you have to believe based purely on faith, really, when you're one of Jehovah's Witnesses. There can be no evidence for it because it all happened invisibly. If anything, there's evidence it couldn't have happened when you actually look at what the faithful and discreet slave was publishing back then. When you look at the Finished Mystery, for example, which was published in 1917, which was the publication they were promoting in 1919, there's plenty of evidence that it was a very, very peculiar, very odd, very eccentric group that had all sorts of bizarre claims that most Jehovah's Witnesses would find alien today. Most Jehovah's Witnesses would fall over if they had even an inkling of what's in the Finished Mystery. There's a reason why Jehovah's Witnesses don't have access to it on jw.org. But anyway, essentially my point is, this is a conversation between Jesus and his disciples. It's not a conversation between Jehovah's Witnesses and the governing body and the organization. In fact, it doesn't say organization anywhere. It's referring to Jesus. And my second point would be, why is it healthy or proper to follow someone based on sayings of everlasting life? I actually make this point in my book. I mean, I did write the damn thing, so I'm entitled to plug it on my own YouTube channel. How to Escape from Jehovah's Witnesses. There's actually a chapter. It's actually chapter 1, Lord, whom shall we go away to? There you go. And in that chapter, I make the argument that, anyone can claim that if you follow them, they'll help you live forever, Follow me, and you'll get all sorts of wonderful things. I'll make sure you get a dream home. I'll make sure you get an amazing pension. It may take a while, I'm not promising it straight away, but trust me, if you just bear with me, and if you follow me for a while, and for a while you do everything I ask you to do, great things will happen to you. You know, if that were to happen in real life, if we were to meet someone who had that sort of proposition for us, we'd hopefully run a mile, wouldn't we? We'd hopefully think, no, if it sounds too good to be true, it usually is. I'm not going to follow someone just because they're making extraordinary promises. So I have a problem, quite frankly, as a skeptic, with the entire proposition of following someone just because they have sayings of everlasting life. In the case of the governing body, they have sayings of everlasting life, but what they don't have, if we're comparing the governing body with Jesus, or at least the Jesus that's written about in the Gospels, what they don't have are any form of credentials in terms of miracles or demonstrable proof that they have any kind of divine backing. This is why when you're watching Jehovah's Witness propaganda, they routinely talk about Jehovah's hand. They grasp around almost anything that they can point to as evidence that the organization is enjoying some kind of divine intervention, some kind of assistance from God that's proof that God is behind the organization. And it's nearly always something that's completely, in fact, it is always something that's completely mundane or coincidental. They don't have anything that they can point to in terms of, I don't know, turning water into wine, or maybe Tony Morris walking across Stirling Forest Lake in a storm. They don't have anything like that, do they? And at least if you're to take the Gospels at face value, which I don't, by the way, at least Jesus could give them that. He could say, well, I've given you all these demonstrations to show you that I have supernatural powers, or at least I'm being sponsored by someone with supernatural powers. So you at least have that to go on. I'm not just giving you grandiose promises. I'm actually demonstrating in the here and now that there's a strong likelihood that I can deliver on these promises. That's a huge difference between the sayings of everlasting life that the governing body has and the sayings of everlasting life that Jesus was offering. In addition to having that problem with John 6, verses 67 to 69, I also have a problem with the tone of Jehovah's Witnesses when they're using this verse. In the Gospels, it's not Jesus who says this, oh, where else are you going to go? I have sayings of everlasting life. In John, it's Peter who says that to Jesus. Lord, whom shall we go to? You have sayings of everlasting life. When an organization that claims to speak on behalf of Jesus without offering any evidence is pushing this scripture on its followers, it's behaving in a very narcissistic way if you think about it. What they're effectively saying is, where else are you going to go? Who else is going to have you? You know, which is what you could easily imagine a toxic, narcissistic partner saying to someone. I'm the only one that's going to have you. I'm the only one that's going to allow you to live with them or have a family with them. I'm the only one who's interested. I'm the only party. I'm the only circus in town. So where else are you going to go if you leave me? There's nothing for you. I am your entire universe. That's a very narcissistic, sinister thing to suggest, isn't it? A very controlling attitude to have. And yet that's exactly how Jehovah's Witnesses, or the leaders of Jehovah's Witnesses, use this verse on their followers. So quite apart from the logical issues that I've already highlighted, I have a problem with the overall tenor I guess, of the apologetics that are deployed using this particular verse. But ultimately, I have to repeat, I'm afraid, what I've said on previous voicemails. And if you've been following the channel, as you seem to have been doing over a number of years, you'll know that I say this in my voicemails. We can't do people's thinking for them, unfortunately. I'm giving you my answer to John 6, verses 67 to 69, as used by Jehovah's Witnesses, because hopefully it will be of some use to people who are tuning into this channel who might be Jehovah's Witnesses themselves, or who might be genuinely grappling with this verse because it's being used on them by their loved ones. But in terms of you salvaging your parents or getting them to abandon their beliefs, I'm not sure that's something you should necessarily be chasing. And I can understand and relate to where you're coming from, because I've had these feelings regarding my father. In the early stages of my deprogramming, I was convinced I could reason with him and perhaps shake him out of his indoctrination. But is it ethical to insist that others share our views? Is it ethical to try to do people's thinking for them? I would submit that people need to go on their own journey in these areas. And all we can really do is be loving and kind and supportive. If they come at you with arguments, with John 6, 67 to 69, or with some other reason why you ought to become a Jehovah's Witness, it's quite right that you have something to say, or that you express yourself honestly and kindly about your position. But I personally have moved on from trying to convince people who are Jehovah's Witnesses who I grew up with, let's say, that they need to abandon their beliefs. You know, my channel's here for them if they want to listen to what I have to say. I'm pretty sure my dad knows I have a YouTube channel. I'm pretty sure many of the people I grew up with who are still Jehovah's Witnesses know that I have a YouTube channel. And if they want to know what my opinions are, they know where to find me. But I'm certainly not going to be knocking on their door or chasing them down in the street and telling them, you're in a cult, you need to snap out of it. Here's some information you should look at. It just doesn't sit right with me at all to have that attitude. It's a very personal journey that they need to go on in their own time. So respectfully, I would suggest reconsidering your strategy. Frankly, I think it's brilliant that they are willing to have a relationship with you on the terms you have described, where you just get on as family members and you don't discuss religion. I think that's fantastic. And I think if you can build on that and hold on to that, that's more than many people who tune into my channel have. It's certainly more than I have with my dad. So it might be worth having a little bit of introspection and revisiting the merits of pursuing this line of argumentation with your parents, who seem very happy in their religion. And as long as they're willing to have a relationship with you, maybe that alone is something worth cherishing. But that's all I really have to say on this particular voicemail. Don't forget that if you would like to leave a voicemail, the thing to do is go to speakpipe.com/Cedars, remembering to indicate clearly if you don't want me to play your message on my channel. But that's about all we have time for. Thank you so much for watching.